How can I be pregnant when I've never been with a man? Princess Clara whispered in horror, her hands trembling as her mother's voice sliced through the quiet of the palace hall. The words hung like a dark cloud, heavy with mystery and dread, as Clara stood beneath the flickering torches, her world unraveling thread by thread. In the sprawling kingdom of Eldora, Queen Margaret ruled from a towering throne of gold and iron, its arms carved with roaring lions and soaring eagles. Her sharp eyes glinted like steel, missing nothing, not the flutter of a servant's apron nor the whisper of a noble's plotting tongue. For 20 long years, she had guided Eldora through raging floods that swallowed fields, dry summers that cracked the earth, and a bitter war with the shadowy land of Vaughan, whose raiders once touched villages along the border. The people adored her strength. Baker John, with flour dust in his broad hands, baked loaves in her honor. Blacksmith Will, his hammer ringing against iron, forged swords for her guards. Widow Sarah, her needle flashing through cloth, stitched banners that bore Margaret's crest, a lion crowned with stars. But beneath her jeweled crown, a cold fear festered. Eldora's laws, etched in stone by kings long dead, demanded a male heir to claim the throne. No queen, however mighty, could pass it to a daughter. Margaret's husband, King Thomas, had met his end a decade ago, his horse rearing wild during a hunt, leaving her with one child, Princess Clara, a girl whose heart glowed like a lantern in the dark. Clara was Eldora's treasure, a princess who danced through life with a smile that warmed even the frostiest mornings. Her bright eyes sparkled as she knelt beside Widow Sarah, threading needles to mend blankets for the shivering poor. She'd race across the meadows with Timmy, the shepherd boy, giggling as his lambs nipped at her skirts. In the palace gardens, she'd sit cross-legged with Lily, the gardener's daughter, weaving daisy chains that crowned their heads like halos. A princess should care for everyone, she'd say to Elle, her cheerful maid, as they scrubbed mud from her dress after she tumbled with Jack and Jill, the Miller's twins, by the rushing river. She'd visit Baker John for a warm roll, still steaming from the oven, or watch blacksmith who shape a horseshoe, her questions bubbling like a brook. Gardener Paul, Lily's father, taught her the names of every flower, roses, tulips, violets, and she'd carry bouquets to Hannah, the palace cook, who kneaded dough with hands tough as oak. But Queen Margaret saw no power in Clara's kindness. "She's too soft," she grumbled one evening, pacing the stone balcony with Lord Edwin, her grey-bearded advisor, whose could never stop scratching parchment. The wind tugged at her velvet cloak as she watched Clara below, handing a crust of bread to a beggar boy with patched trousers. "She thinks smiles can hold a kingdom together. She's blind to the truth, thrones are forged in steel, not flowers." Edwin nodded, his thin lips pressed tight. "The council grows restless, Your Majesty. Without a son, Lord Victor waits like a vulture." Lord Victor was a snake in noble robes, a distant cousin with a thin mustache and eyes that gleamed with hunger. He lingered in the palace corridors, whispering to lesser lords about his right to rule, his voice oily as spilled wine. Margaret's blood boiled at the thought. She'd built Eldora into a fortress of order, roads paved, granaries filled, borders guarded by Sir Roland, the gruff captain whose sword had slain Vaughan raiders. She couldn't let Victor, with his sly grins and empty promises, steal it all. Her legacy, her name, her family's grip on the throne, it all hinged on a prince. If none existed, she'd carve one from the chaos, no matter who bled in the process. Clara, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's heart, lived her days in a wall of light. She'd sit in the kitchen with Hannah, rolling dough while Hannah's husband, Peter, the stableman, brushed the royal horses outside. Their son, James, a quiet servant with calloused hands, polished armor in the corner, his brown eyes flicking to Clara as she laughed. His little brother, Ben, all of 10 years old, darted around, swinging a wooden sword and dreaming of knighthood. "You'll be a great knight one day, Ben," Clara told him, ruffling his hair. She treated them like kin, her warmth spilling over everyone, Molly, the young dishwasher who hummed as she scrubbed pots, gardener Paul, who pruned hedges with a whistle, even Sir Roland, whose stern face softened when she thanked him for guarding the gates. One stormy night, as rain lashed the palace and thunder growled like a beast, Margaret summoned James to her private chamber. The room smelled of wax and damp stone, its walls hung with tapestries of old kings. Sir Roland stood by the door, his hand on his sword, while Lord Edwin sat at a desk, his quill scratching. "James," Margaret said, her voice steady as the storm raged, "Eldora's future rests on your shoulders." James bowed, his damp hair clinging to his forehead. "Your Majesty, I'll serve however I can." "You will give Princess Clara a son," Margaret declared, her words sharp as a blade through the air. James's knees wobbled, his breath catching. "Your Majesty, I can't. She's a princess, it's wrong. She's good to me, to my family." Margaret stepped closer, her shadow swallowing the candlelight. "Do it, or your family pays. Peter's too old to find work elsewhere. Anna's kitchen. I'll shut it down. Ben's dreams of being a knight. Dust. Obey me, and I'll fill your hands with gold. Refuse, and you'll have nothing but shame." James's heart thumped like a war drum. He saw Hannah's tired smile as she baked, Peter's gentle hands brushing a mare, Ben's wide eyes gleaming with hope. He wanted to run, to hide in the stables with Peter's horses, but Margaret's threats were chains around his wrist. 3 days later, she called him again. The chamber was dim, Molly having just left after delivering a tray of tea that steamed in the cold air. "Sit," Margaret ordered, pointing to a wooden chair carved with vines. James sat, his hands trembling so hard the chair creaked. "You've been loyal," she began, her eyes boring into him, polishing armor, helping Peter with the horses. "But now I need more. Clara must have a son. It's the only way to keep Victor's claws off my throne." "Please, ma'am," James begged, his voice cracking, "she's kind to me, to everyone. She doesn't deserve this. I can't hurt her." "Kindness doesn't rule a kingdom," Margaret snapped, her voice a whip. "Do it, James, or I'll tell Sir Roland you stole gold from the treasury. Who will they believe, a servant boy or their queen? Your family will starve in the streets." Tears stung James's eyes. He saw Ben swinging his wooden sword, Hannah kneading dough, Peter limping from a long day. "I'll do it," he whispered, his voice barely a breath, his soul fracturing with every word. That night, Margaret handed him a small glass bottle, its liquid clear as spring water. "Put this in her tea," she said, her tone flat as stone. "She'll sleep deep and dreamless. She won't fight if she doesn't know." James took it, his fingers numb, guilt clawing at his chest like a trapped animal. He slipped into the kitchen, where Molly hummed a tune about a lost cat, her freckled hands scrubbing a pot. "You okay, James?" she asked, tilting her head. "Just tired," he lied, his voice hollow as he prepared Clara's tea, tipping the bottle's contents in with a shaking hand. He carried it to her room, where Ella folded blankets and Clara sat by the window, watching the rain. "Thank you, James," Clara said, her smile bright as a star as she took the cup. She sipped, chatting about the lambs Timmy had shown her, until her words slurred, her eyes drooped, and she slumped onto her bed, fast asleep. James stood over her, tears streaming down his cheeks, soaking his shirt. "I'm sorry," he choked out, his voice breaking. Margaret's threats pounded in his skull, "Do it, or they suffer." With a heart heavy as iron, he followed her orders, each moment a dagger twisting in his gut. When it was done, he stumbled from the room, unable to look at Clara's peaceful face, her dark hair spilled across the pillow like a river of ink. Margaret waited in the hall with Sir Roland, her face a mask of stone. "Here's your gold," she said, tossing him a pouch that clinked with coins. "Leave Eldora tonight. Tell no one, or your family's blood is on your hands." The next morning, Clara woke, rubbing her temples. "Why can't I remember falling asleep?" she thought, frowning. I never forget that. But James's shy smile and Mama's stern care pushed the worry away, for now. She told Elle, who shrugged as she fluffed a pillow. Maybe you were just tired, Elle said. Life rolled on. Widow Sarah stitched her a wool scarf, Timmy showed her lamb with a crooked ear, Lily brought daisies that smelled of spring. James vanished, and Margaret told Hannah and Peter he'd gone to visit kin in the hills. He'll be back, Hannah said, her voice hopeful, though Peter frowned, sensing something amiss. Weeks passed, and Clara grew weary, her stomach churning like a stormy sea. She'd sit with Elle in the library, surrounded by dusty books, or help Hannah bake, her hands slower than usual. One afternoon, as she read A Tale of Nights to Jack and Jill, Margaret stormed in, her cloak swirling. You're pregnant, she snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet. What have you done? Clara's eyes widened, her book slipping to the floor. Pregnant? Mama, I don't understand. I've never. Don't lie to me. Margaret shouted, her face flushed. You've shamed us all. Then, her tone softened, a false warmth creeping in. But I'm your mother. I'll protect you. We'll keep this quiet. She glared at Elle, who clutched a duster. Not a word, or you're out on the streets. Elle nodded, her hands trembling. Margaret spread a tale through the palace that Clara had been tricked by a village boy, some nameless lad from the fields. Sir Roland's guards patrolled, silencing whispers, and her fierce glare stopped questions before they began. Clara wept, her tears soaking her pillow, her mind a tangle of confusion and fear. I don't know how this happened, she told Lily, who hugged her tight. Margaret's sudden care, bringing bowls of broth, fussing over her rest, eased her terror, though a shadow of doubt clung to her heart. Months later, she gave birth to Henry, a boy with her bright eyes and a tiny, gurgling laugh that filled the room. Margaret beamed, her hands clasped as if in prayer. The future king, she declared, her voice ringing with triumph. Clara, still lost in the fog of her pregnancy, poured love into Henry. She sang lullabies with Elle, let Timmy hold him, watched Jack and Jill chase him as he toddled through the gardens. The villagers adored him, Baker John baked him a cake, blacksmith Will forged a tiny toy hammer, Widow Sarah sewed him a cap. But questions gnawed at Clara like rats in the walls. One crisp morning, as she cleaned Margaret's room, Elle sick with a cold, she found a hidden drawer in the desk, its lock broken. Inside was a corked vial with a faded label, Sleep. Margaret had forgotten it, buried among old letters after James fled. What's this? Clara murmured, her heart thudding. She'd seen one like it in the kitchen, hadn't she? Margaret burst in, her face a storm. What are you doing? She demanded, snatching the vial. Mama, what's this? Clara asked, her voice trembling. Forget it, Margaret snapped, her eyes blazing. Some things stay buried. That night, she tossed the vial into the roaring fireplace, watching it melt into ash. No one will know, she whispered, her breath fogging in the chill. Clara couldn't forget. The vial's gleam haunted her dreams, a puzzle with no edges. 5 years passed, and Henry grew into a whirlwind of joy, his dark curls bouncing as he raced with Jack and Jill or climbed trees with Timmy, who called him Prince Hen. The kingdom thrived under Margaret's iron rule, roads stretched wider, markets bustled, guards drilled under Sir Roland's bellows. But a twist shook Eldora's foundations. A stranger arrived, a woman named Mora, cloaked in grey, her eyes like storm clouds brewing over the hills. She was a Von exile who'd served Thomas, gifted with visions after touching a cursed Von relic. She spoke to the villagers in the square. A child of shadow will rise, she said, her voice low and deep, and the crown will fall unless truth lights the way. Baker John scratched his head, blacksmith will gripped his hammer, and Widow Sarah clutched her shawl, whispering Mora's words to Lily. Margaret scoffed from her throne, Lord Edwin at her side. A fraud, she spat. A trickster stirring trouble. But Lord Victor sees the prophecy like a dagger. It proves Margaret's rule is cursed, he told the council, his mustache twitching as he paced the marble chamber. A child of shadow. Her line is tainted. I should take the throne. Edwin frowned, his loyalty wavering, while Sir Roland shifted uneasily, his hand on his sword. For months, Victor had slipped coins to Vaughan's spies, whispering of a lost prince, building his scheme in the shadows. Meanwhile, James returned. He'd wandered the hills for years, the gold pouch heavy in his pocket, his guilt heavier still. He'd settled in a hill village, hauling wood for a tanner, when a trader named Finn arrived, boasting of Eldora's strong prince and a seer's prophecy. Truth lights the way, Finn said, and James's heart jolted, he knew it was time. He faced Sir Roland at the gates, rain dripping from his hood. Tell Queen Margaret I'm here for my son, he said, his voice steady as stone. Margaret met him in a hidden room, its walls damp with secrets. Lord Edwin scribbled notes, and Victor lurked in the shadows, his eyes glinting. You have no claim, Margaret spat, her voice venomous. Leave, or I ruin you, your family, your name, all of it. I'm done hiding, James said, meeting her gaze. Clara deserves the truth. Before Margaret could summon Roland, James slipped through the corridors, his boots silent on the stone. He found Clara in the garden, where Henry chased Lily and Timmy with a stick sword, their laughter ringing. Princess, James said, stepping forward, his voice soft but firm, Henry's my son. Your mother forced me, she drugged your tea with that vial. Clara's world tilted, the flowers blurring around her. Mama, is this true? She demanded as Margaret stormed in, Victor trailing like a shadow, his smirk barely hidden. I did it for Eldora, Margaret said, her voice cold as ice. Without a prince, we'd lose everything to Victor's greed. You betrayed me. Clara cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. You stole my choices, my life. She turned to James, her voice shaking. Why didn't you stop her? I tried, he said, his head bowed, rain dripping from his cloak. She threatened Hannah, Peter, Ben. I begged her, but she'd have destroyed them. I've hated myself every day since. Mora emerged from the trees, her grey cloak billowing. The prophecy speaks of you, Clara, she said, her voice echoing. A child of shadow will rise, only truth can save the crown. Victor's smirk widened, sensing his moment, but Clara's eyes blazed with fire. Mama, you've lied to everyone, to me, to the kingdom. And you, James, why now? Mora's words woke me, James said, his hands clenched. I heard them from a trader, Finn, and I couldn't stay away from my son, from the truth. Margaret's face twisted with fury, but another betrayal unfolded. Elle, 4 years biting her tongue under Margaret's glare, broke under James's return and Henry's innocent laughter. She whispered to widow Sarah, I can't lie anymore, and Sarah told Baker John, who told blacksmith Will. The villagers gathered, their voices rising, Sarah steady, John's gruff, Will's deep. Clara's our heart. Sarah cried, leading them to the palace gates. Edwin, hearing their chants, faced Margaret in the throne room. The council wavers, Your Majesty. The people want Clara. Victor's behind this, Margaret hissed, her eyes darting to him. He's poisoned them. Victor slunk back, but Sir Roland hesitated, his loyalty split. Clara stood tall, Henry clutching her hand. Mama, your control ends now. Henry's mine. James, you can see him if I allow it. A guard burst in, panting. Your Majesty, the treasury's been raided. Gold's gone. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Victor, she growled, but he was already slipping out, his cloak vanishing around the corner. He'd raided the treasury with Cale, a Vaughan spy, planning to fund an uprising. Clara stepped forward. No, she said, her voice ringing. Let me face this. The people deserve truth, not more lies. Days later, a boy appeared at the gates, escorted by Kale, his face scarred from battles. The boy, 10 years old, had Margaret's sharp eyes and Thomas's jaw. "I'm Prince Leon," he declared, his voice bold. "Queen Margaret's son," hidden in Vaughan. Margaret froze, her face paling. "Impossible," she whispered, but Kale smirked. She bore him in secret a year before Thomas's death, during a trip to a border fortress. She bribed a midwife, old Nan, to smuggle him to Vaughan under a truce, fearing Victor's spies. Clara stared at her mother. "Another lie?" she asked, her voice breaking. Margaret's silence answered. Leon was her first attempt to secure the throne, hidden until Victor found him. The kingdom erupted. Villagers demanded answers. Edwin called a trial in the great hall, the council seated, Roland guarding the doors. Mora stood witness. "The child of shadow isn't Henry," she said. "It's Leon, hidden in darkness. Henry's truth saves us." James bared his guilt. Clara faced Leon, who glared with Margaret's coldness. "You're my brother," she said, kneeling after the trial, "but you've been twisted by lies." Her warmth pierced his shell, and he nodded. "I'll stay." Margaret confessed, her voice hollow. "I hid Leon to protect the throne. I used James for Henry when Victor grew bold. I thought I could control it all. Victor, captured by Roland, spat, I'd have ruled better." But Edwin, who doubted the law for years, rallied the council. Clara's proven her worth, let tradition bend. The laws changed, and Clara became queen. Clara, backed by Edwin and the council, ordered Roland to escort Margaret to a windswept cottage. "The people have spoken," Roland said, his sword drawn. Her allies stayed silent, fearing the mob. Leon learned from Clara. Victor was jailed, the gold returned. Henry laughed with Timmy, untouched by the past, while James walked with Peter, Hannah, and Ben, who trained with Roland. Mora lingered, guiding Clara in secret, her work done. Eldora shone with hope, its shadows burned away by truth. Thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed the story. Share your thoughts below and tell your friends about this epic story. Let's spread the magic of storytelling together.